Before we begin, I'd like to invite you, wherever you are, to join this journey across time. Maybe you're listening from the US, curled beneath a heavy wool blanket as the heater hums. Or perhaps you're in Europe, where the winter night has already fallen and the ancient stones of the city outside are beginning to weep with the evening mist. Maybe you're in Australia, where the heat of the day still hums against the windows and Christmas feels like a summer dream. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? What time is it there as we drift into this story together? If you haven't already, make yourself comfortable. Dim the lights. Pour a warm drink, perhaps a little cocoa, or tea with plenty of honey. Let the day, with all its modern noise and frantic demands, simply fade away into the periphery. Let the past begin to breathe once more. Tonight, we aren't visiting the grand ballrooms or the sun-drenched courtyards of the High Middle Ages. Instead, we are going down, deep beneath the foundations, where the air is thick with the scent of wet earth and the silence is so heavy it feels like a physical touch. We'll wander through the shadows of the hollow stone, listen to the drip of forgotten water, and uncover the chilling reality of a life lived in the dark. Now, are you ready? The year is 1348, or perhaps it is 1212. It matters little once the heavy oak door of the upper keep groans shut, and the iron bolt slides home with a sound like a hammer hitting an anvil. You are standing at the top of a spiral staircase, and the air here is already different. It is colder, yes, but it is also older. It carries the weight of every stone stacked above your head, a crushing architectural silence that makes your ears ring. As we begin our descent, I want you to imagine the light, or rather, the lack of it. You are following a jailer whose torch flickers with a desperate, orange light, casting long, dancing shadows that seem to leap across the damp masonry like nervous spirits. The stairs are narrow, worn into smooth bowls in the center by centuries of boots, and they are slippery with a fine, gray film of moisture. You have to press your shoulder against the cold wall just to keep your balance, feeling the rough texture of the mortar against your skin. And the further down you go, the more the warmth of the upper world feels like a distant, impossible memory. Consider, for a moment, the concept of a medieval dungeon. In our modern minds, we often think of rows of cells, perhaps like a Victorian prison, but the reality was far more chaotic and far more intimate. The word dungeon itself comes from the French donjon, which originally referred to the great keep or the central tower of a castle. It was the place of power, the heart of the lord's domain. But over time, the word began to migrate downward, creeping from the high halls of the nobility into the lightless pits beneath them. To be in the dungeon was to be at the very bottom of the feudal hierarchy, literally and figuratively. You are beneath the feet of the knights, beneath the kitchens where the roasting meat smells of rosemary and fat, beneath even the stables. You are in the roots of the castle, and those roots are made of cold, unyielding limestone. As we reach the bottom of the stairs, the air grows still. There is no wind here, no breeze to stir the heavy atmosphere. There is only the smell. It isn't just the smell of waste, though that is certainly there, a sharp, ammoniac sting that catches in the back of your throat. It is the smell of the earth itself, the scent of damp wool that never quite dries, and the metallic tang of rusted iron. It is a smell that settles into your clothes and stays there, a permanent reminder of your location. Imagine your clothes now. You aren't wearing a modern coat or thermal layers. You are likely in a tunic of coarse linen or wool, perhaps a pair of hose that have already begun to soak up the dampness of the floor. There is no such thing as dry in a medieval dungeon. Everything is perpetually, miserably humid. If you touch the wall, your hand comes away slick with a cold, clear liquid that isn't quite water. It's the castle sweating, the condensation of the warmer air from above meeting the subterranean chill of the foundations. In these first few hours, the psychological weight begins to settle. In the medieval mind, the world was a place of high drama, of God and the devil, of light and shadow. To be cast into the dark was not just a physical punishment, it was a spiritual one. You are being removed from the light of the sun, which was often equated with the light of the Creator. To be in the dark was to be forgotten by the world. The walls here are several feet thick, designed to withstand siege engines and fire, which means they are also remarkably good at keeping sound out. You might hear the faint, muffled vibration of a bell ringing in a distant chapel, or the heavy thud of a horse's hoof on the drawbridge fire above. But these sounds are like echoes from another planet. They don't belong to you anymore. You belong to the silence. And then there is the cold. We must talk about the cold, because it is the true master of this place. This isn't the crisp, bracing cold of a winter walk. It is a parasitic cold. It is patient. It doesn't attack you all at once. Instead, it waits for you to sit down. It waits for you to stop moving. In the medieval era, there was no insulation. There were no double-paned windows. In fact, down here, there are likely no windows at all, save for perhaps a narrow, flared slit high up in the wall that allows a gray, pathetic light to filter in for an hour a day. This cold seeps up through the soles of your shoes, which are likely thin leather, offering no protection against the stone. It begins to numb your toes, then your ankles, slowly climbing its way up your legs like a rising tide of ice. You try to rub your arms to keep the blood flowing, but even your own skin feels cold to the touch, like something that doesn't belong to you. You look around your cell. It isn't much larger than a pantry. There's a pile of straw in the corner, but it isn't the fresh, golden straw of a harvest festival. It is old straw, grayed by moisture and broken into fine, dusty needles. It has been used by others before you, and it carries the faint, lingering scent of their presence. You might think of laying down, but the straw feels damp, and you know that once you lay down, the cold from the floor will have a direct path to your core. So you sit, huddled, your knees pulled up to your chest, trying to conserve the small, flickering candle flame of your own body heat. The jailer, a man whose name you do not know and whose face was mostly hidden by the soot of his torch, has left you a small wooden bowl and a ceramic jug. Inside the jug is water, but it is so cold it makes your teeth ache, and it tastes of the stone it was stewed in. The bread is a hard, dark rye, the kind of bread that was baked weeks ago and has since turned into something resembling a brick. In the medieval world, bread was the staff of life, but here, it is a test of endurance. You have to break it with your hands, listening to the dry crack as it yields, and when you chew it, the grains feel like sand against your palate. It is a slow process, eating in the dark. You find yourself focusing on the sound of your own chewing, the rhythmic crunch, crunch, crunch becoming the only clock you have. Time, it is a strange thing down here. Without the movement of the sun across the sky, without the shifting shadows of trees or the activity of a bustling street, time begins to stretch and warp. Minutes feel like hours. You find yourself waiting for sounds that never come. You count the drips of water falling from a crack in the ceiling. 1, 2, 3. And you wonder how long it took for that crack to form. Was it there when the castle was built? Did a mason, centuries ago, miss a spot in the mortar, unknowingly creating a metronome for a prisoner yet to be born? The medieval world was one of cycles, the cycle of the seasons, the cycle of the liturgy. But in the dungeon, the cycle is broken. There's only the now, and the now is very cold and very dark. You might try to talk to yourself, just to hear a human voice. But your voice sounds different here. It doesn't travel. It is swallowed by the stone walls, muffled by the heavy air. It sounds small and fragile, like the chirping of a cricket in a cathedral. You might whisper a prayer, perhaps a paternoster or an Ave Maria. the words familiar and comforting, a tether to the world you left behind. In the 14th century, faith wasn't an abstract concept. It was the very fabric of reality. You might imagine the saints looking down through the layers of rock, their eyes bright with pity. You wonder if Saint Leonard, the patron saint of prisoners, is watching you now. Legend says he could break chains with a touch. You look at the iron ring bolted into the wall near your feet, and wonder if it has ever felt the touch of a saint. The iron. Let's consider the iron. In the medieval period, iron was a precious commodity, but it was used lavishly in the construction of prisons. The bars on the door are thick, hand-forged by a blacksmith whose hammer strokes you can still see in the ripples of the metal. It is cold, oily, and smells of old rust. If you grip the bars, the cold of the metal seems to reach into your very bones. It is a reminder of the industrial might of the feudal lord. This isn't just a room, it's a machine designed to hold you. The door is made of oak, perhaps 4 inches thick, reinforced with horizontal iron bands. It doesn't just lock, it seals. When it is closed, you are effectively in a tomb that hasn't been buried yet. As the night comes, though you only know it because the tiny sliver of light from the high slit has turned from gray to a deep, bruising purple, the temperature drops even further. The stone walls, which have spent the day absorbing the chill of the earth, begin to radiate it back at you. This is the sleepy part of the torture, a slow descent into lethargy. Your body, in an attempt to protect your vital organs, begins to pull blood away from your extremities. Your fingers become clumsy. Your toes go from painful to numb to strangely absent. You feel a profound sense of tiredness, a desire to simply close your eyes and let the darkness take over. But you know that if you sleep too deeply, the cold will move in. You hear sound then, a soft, rhythmic scratching. It isn't a jailer, and it isn't the wind. It is the sound of tiny claws on stone. The rats of the medieval dungeon were not the sleek, frightened creatures of modern subways. They were the masters of the lower depths. They lived in the walls, in the foundations, in the secret spaces between the rocks. To them, you are not a prisoner or a person of rank. You are simply a large, warm mountain that has appeared in their territory. They are curious, and they are hungry. You see a pair of glinting eyes in the corner, reflecting the tiny bit of starlight that manages to find its way down. They don't fear you, because they know you aren't going anywhere. In the medieval mind, rats were often seen as messengers of the devil or carriers of bad air, and in the silence of the cell, their presence feels heavy with omen. You try to shift your position, but your hose are now damp with the sweat of the floor, and the movement sent a fresh shiver racing up your spine. Shivering is your body's last-ditch effort to create heat, a violent, involuntary trembling that leaves you exhausted. You find yourself thinking of a fire. Not just any fire, but the great hearth in the center of a village tavern. You can almost see the orange glow of the embers, hear the crackle of the dry logs, and smell the sweet, pungent scent of peat smoke. You remember the way the heat felt on your face, how it seemed to soak into your skin and melt away the worries of the day. That memory is your only blanket now. You wrap it around yourself, pulling the details of the tavern close, the sound of a lute being tuned, the low murmur of voices, the clink of pewter mugs. But the dungeon has a way of pulling you back. A drop of water falls from the ceiling and lands directly on the back of your neck. It is startlingly cold, like a needle of ice. It trickles down your spine, making you gasp. The dampness is everywhere. It is in the air you breathe, making every inhalation feel heavy and thick. It is in the straw, making it feel like a bed of wet needles. It is in your very soul. This is why you wouldn't last a day. Not because of a lack of food, or because of some dramatic torture, but because of the slow, relentless erosion of your will by the cold and the damp. We are creatures of the sun, creatures of movement and light. To be held in the static, freezing embrace of the hollow stone is to be unmade, bit by bit. Let us consider the jailer again. In the medieval hierarchy, the jailer was often a man of low standing, perhaps a veteran of a long-forgotten war or a servant who was too old for the heavy labor of the fields. He lives in a world of shadows himself, his life defined by the keys at his belt and the prisoners in his charge. He isn't necessarily a cruel man, but he is a distant one. To him, you are a task. He brings the bread, he brings the water, and he checks the locks. He might say a few words, his voice rough and accented with the local dialect, but he doesn't stay long. The air down here is bad for his lungs, too. He prefers the guardroom, where there is a small brazier and the company of other men. When he leaves, taking the light of his torch with him, the darkness that rushes back in feels even more absolute. The darkness is not just a void. In the medieval imagination, the dark was populated. It was the home of the night walkers, of the spirits that couldn't find rest, and of the elemental forces of the earth. As you sit there, the shadows seem to take on shapes. The way the rough stone catches the faint light might look like a face, or a clawed hand reaching from the mortar. You know it is just your mind playing tricks, a result of the sensory deprivation. But in the 14th century, the line between the physical world and the spiritual world was very thin. You might find yourself apologizing to the stones, or whispering to the walls, hoping that the castle itself might show some mercy. And yet, there's a strange, melancholy beauty to it. If you look closely enough, the way the frost forms on the iron bars, delicate and crystalline, like lace made of ice, the way the silence allows you to hear the very heartbeat of the earth, a low, tectonic hum that you never notice in the world above. There's a sense of being at the very center of things, a stillness that is almost meditative. If you can move past the fear and the cold, there's a profound solitude to be found here. But that solitude is a double-edged sword. It offers clarity, but it also offers a terrifying reflection of your own insignificance. In the face of these stones, which have stood for 200 years and will stand for 500 more, your life feels like a single breath in a winter gale. You find yourself wondering about the person who was here before you. Did they sit in this same corner? Did they count these same drips? You see a small mark scratched into the stone near the floor, a simple cross, or perhaps a tally of days. It is a heartbreakingly human gesture, an attempt to leave a mark on a world that is trying to erase you. You trace the mark with your finger, feeling the grit of the stone. It is a connection across time, a shared experience of the dark. You are not the first to suffer here, and you will not be the last. The dungeon is a repository of such stories, a library of the forgotten, written in scratches on the wall and whispers in the silence. As the first few hours turn into a day, your body begins to adapt in small, miserable ways. Your heart rate slows. Your breathing becomes shallow. You enter a state of semi-hibernation, a sleepy haze where the line between waking and dreaming begins to blur. You might dream of a summer field, the sun hot on your shoulders and the scent of crushed grass in the air. You can see the swallows darting through the blue sky, hear the distant chime of a sheep's bell. The dream is so vivid that when you wake to the cold slap of a water drop, the disappointment is almost physical. The transition from the warmth of the mind to the cold of the stone is the hardest part of the day. You look at your hands. In the dim light, they look pale, almost translucent. You flex your fingers, watching the way the skin stretches over the knuckles. You are still here. You are still alive. But life in the dungeon is a different thing than life in the village. It is a stripped-down version of existence, reduced to the barest essentials, breath, thought, and the endurance of the cold. The medieval world was a place of great texture. The roughness of wool, the smoothness of silk, the the heat of the fire, the bite of the wind. Hey, the only texture is the stone. It is the beginning and the end of your world. Imagine the sound of the wind outside. Up in the battlements, the wind is a wild, screaming thing, whipping the banners and howling through the machicolations. But down here, the wind is just a pressure. You can feel it in the way the air seems to tighten during a storm, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that tells you the weather is changing far above. It's a reminder that there's a fire above, that there's a sky and clouds and stars. You try to remember what the stars look like. The North Star, steady and bright. The Great Bear, prowling across the celestial sphere. You realize that you miss the stars more than you miss the sun. The sun is a tyrant, but the stars are companions. The first day is coming to a close. You know this because the jailer returns. This time, he doesn't bring bread, but he brings a small, sputtering candle which he places in a niche in the wall. It is a gesture of rare kindness, or perhaps just a practical necessity for him to see the locks. The light of the candle is tiny, a fragile, yellow bloom in the vast garden of the dark. It creates a small circle of warmth, not physical warmth, but visual warmth. For a few minutes, the cell feels like a room again. The shadows retreat to the corners, and the stone looks less like a prison and more like a wall. You watch the flame, mesmerized by its dance. It is the most beautiful thing you have ever seen. But candles don't last forever. You watch the wax melt, a slow, viscous river of white running down the stone. You find yourself bargaining with it, silently pleading for it to burn just a little slower. Just 5 more minutes of light, you think. Just 5 more minutes of being seen. Because that is the true horror of the dungeon, the feeling of being unseen. In the medieval world, to be seen was to exist, to be recognized by your lord, your family, your neighbors. Hey, no one sees you. You are a secret kept by the castle. When the candle finally flickers and dies, the darkness that follows is deeper than before. It is a thick, velvet blackness that seems to press against your eyes. You are alone again. The cold is back, more insistent now that the sun has truly set. You huddle deeper into your damp clothes, trying to find a pocket of warmth that doesn't exist. You listen to your own breath, a rhythmic whoosh, whoosh that sounds like the tide. You are a survivor of the first day. But the first day was the easy part. The first day was fueled by adrenaline and the shock of the new. Tomorrow, the reality will set in. Tomorrow, the cold will be deeper, the hunger sharper, and the silence longer. But for now, you are here. You have endured the descent. You have faced the hollow stone and the biting frost. You have listened to the whispers of the rats and the rhythm of the drips. You are still breathing. And in the medieval dungeon, that is a victory. As we drift further into this winter night, let the weight of the stone remind you of the strength of your own spirit. The past is a heavy thing, but it is also a story, and you are part of it now. Rest your head, if you can, against the cold masonry. Close your eyes. Let the sleepy historian guide you through the next hour of the dark. We have much more to explore in the depths of the castle, many more secrets to uncover in the freezing silence. But for this moment, just breathe. Just exist. You have lasted the first day. You have survived the first transition. The initial shock of the world being replaced by the weight of the mountain above you. But as the first night stretches into the second morning, a new reality begins to set in. In the world above, the sun might be rising over the frosted battlements of the keep, painting the snow in shades of pale rose and gold. But down here, morning is not a sight. It is a sensation. It is the subtle shift in the dampness of the air, the way the silence feels slightly less thick, and the return of that single, anemic sliver of gray light that crawls across the ceiling like a ghost. This is the hour when the cold truly begins to sharpen its teeth. In the medieval era, people understood that stone was not a dead thing. It was a living, breathing entity that held memory and temperature. And right now, the castle is breathing the winter into your lungs. Let us consider the masonry that surrounds you. We often look at castles and see strength, but to the inhabitant of the dungeon, the castle is a masterpiece of exclusion. The blocks are limestone, perhaps quarried from the very hill the fortress sits upon. They were laid by men who knew that their work would outlast their names, masons who used plumb lines and squares to ensure that there was no hope of escape. Look at the mortar between the stones. It is a mix of lime, sand, and perhaps even animal hair or straw to give it strength. It has hardened over the decades into something tougher than the rock itself. You find yourself tracing the joints with your numbed fingertips. Scritch, 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 searching for a flaw, a loose crumb, a sign of weakness. But there is none. The medieval architect did not build these rooms for comfort. They built them to be the final word in a lord's argument. As the second day begins, your body starts to ache in ways you didn't know were possible. It is a dull, radiating pain in your joints, what the medieval folk might have called the bone ague. Without a bed, without the softness of a mattress stuffed with goose feathers or even clean wool, your weight is distributed directly onto the unyielding floor. Every time you shift, the stone reminds you of your own fragility. Your hips, your shoulders, your elbows, they all protest. You try to fluff up the damp straw, but it offers no more cushion than a handful of wet needles. You are being slowly pressed between the earth and the castle, a human grain between two millstones. Think about the silence again. It is not empty. It is filled with the internal sounds of the castle. If you press your ear to the wall, you might hear the thrum of the wind fire above, vibrating through the massive structure like a low-frequency bell. You might hear the distant, rhythmic clack-clack of a loom in the weaver's quarters, or the muffled barking of a hound in the bailey. These sounds are distorted by the layers of stone, turned into something mechanical and strange. They remind you that the world is moving on without you. The castle is a machine of war and administration, and you are simply a piece of grit that has fallen into the gears. In the 14th century, the concept of the humus governed how people understood their health. You feel your phlegm rising, the cold, moist humor that the medieval doctors believed caused lethargy and dullness. You feel slow, your thoughts drifting like smoke in a windless room. You find yourself staring at the wall for what feels like minutes, only to realize that an hour has passed. This is the sleepy fog of the dungeon, a psychological defense mechanism where the mind retreats inward because the outward world is too harsh to bear. You begin to build rooms in your head. You decorate them with tapestries. You fill them with the scent of dried lavender and the warmth of a roaring fire. You spend a long time imagining the texture of a velvet cloak, the way the light catches the pile, the deep, regal crimson of the dye. It is a necessary hallucination. The jailer arrives with the morning's pittance. Today, the water in your jug has a thin crust of ice on it. You have to break it with your thumb. The cold snap of the ice a sharp contrast to the dull ache of your hand. The bread is even harder today. A piece of trench bread that was likely used as a plate in the great hole before being sent down to the depths. It tastes of stale ale and old grease. You eat slowly, meticulously, savoring the small burst of energy it gives you. In the medieval world, food was not just nutrition. It was a symbol of status. To eat the king's bread was to be under his protection. To eat the jailer's scraps is to be under his thumb. You find yourself wondering about the oubliette, that most terrifying of medieval inventions. The word comes from the French oublier, to forget. It was often a deep, bottle-shaped pit accessed only through a trapdoor in the ceiling. While you are in a cell with a door, the idea of the oubliette haunts the corners of your mind. to be dropped into a hole and have the lid closed, to be literally forgotten. It was the ultimate expression of the Lord's high justice. You look at the floor of your cell, half expecting it to give way to another, deeper darkness. The medieval dungeon was a hierarchy of misery, and there was always someone, somewhere, in a deeper hole than yours. Let's talk about the light, that sliver of gray that visits you. It is your only clock. You watch it move across the stones, a slow, agonizingly deliberate crawl. It highlights things you didn't notice before. A patch of moss, surprisingly green and vibrant in this tomb, clinging to a damp corner. How does it survive? It drinks the moisture from the air and eats the very minerals of the stone. You find yourself envying the moss. It belongs here. It doesn't feel the cold or the loneliness. It just is. You reach out and touch it. The velvet softness a startling contrast to the rough masonry. It is the only living thing you have touched besides yourself in 24 hours. The humidity is a silent thief. It steals the heat from your skin and the breath from your lungs. It turns your hair into a lank, damp weight. In the medieval era, they believed that miasmas or bad air caused disease. Down here, the air feels heavy, thick with the size of the earth. You find yourself coughing, a shallow, dry sound that echoes off the low ceiling. You worry that the lung rot might take hold. In a world without antibiotics, a simple chest cold in a freezing dungeon could be a death sentence. You wrap your arms tighter around yourself, trying to create a fortress of your own ribs. And then there is the psychological game of the shadows. As the gray light fades and the second night approaches, the shadows return with a new intensity. They aren't just dark spots, they are voids. You start to hear things that aren't there. Was that a footstep in the corridor? A key turning in a lock? You strain your ears, your heart hammering against your chest like a trapped bird. But it is just the castle settling, the stone contracting as the temperature drops. The medieval mind was populated by spirits, brownies, bogies, and the restless dead. You wonder if the man who died in this cell a century ago is standing in the corner, watching you with hollow eyes. You whisper a protection spell, a fragment of folk magic your grandmother taught you, mixing the names of saints with older, stranger words. The cold is no longer a guest. It is the landlord. It has settled into your marrow. You find that you can no longer stop shivering. Your muscles are exhausted from the constant vibration. This is the stage where the sleepy narration becomes a necessity, a way to lure your mind away from the physical distress. Imagine you are back in the village church. It is Christmas Eve. The air is cold there, too. But it is a holy cold, filled with the scent of incense and beeswax. The choir is singing, their voices rising to the timbered roof in a weave of polyphony. The candles are so many that they look like a field of fallen stars. You are safe. You are surrounded by your neighbors, the warmth of their bodies, the familiarity of their faces. It is a shield against the dark. Hold on to that image. Don't let the dungeon take it. You look at the iron ring in the wall again. It is a staple, hand-forged and deeply embedded into the rock. It has a dull sheen where generations of chains have rubbed against it. You imagine the stories it could tell. A rebellious knight, a fallen priest, common thief. They all sat where you sit. They all looked at this same ring. It is a silent witness to centuries of human endurance. In the medieval period, history wasn't something you read in a book. It was something you lived. You are currently a page in the castle's ledger, a temporary entry in a long, dark history of incarceration. The jailer doesn't come back tonight. The silence is absolute. You realize that you are thirsty again, but the water in the jug is now a solid block of ice. You have to lick the surface, the cold burning your tongue, a sharp, metallic sting. This is the reality of the freezing dungeon. The basic elements of life are turned against you. Water becomes stone. Air becomes a burden. Wood becomes a memory. You find yourself talking to the ice, a low, rambling monologue about the taste of summer plums and the way the rain feels on a warm July afternoon. You are trying to keep your language alive, to keep yourself from dissolving into the stone. The darkness is so complete that you can't see your own hand in front of your face. You are a mind floating in a void. This is where the world-weary historian in you takes over. You begin to analyze your own situation as if you were a scholar 1,000 years in the future. Subject shows signs of advanced hypothermia. Cognitive functions are slowing. Hallucinatory episodes are increasing. It is a way of distancing yourself from the pain, of turning your suffering into a data point. The medieval people were remarkably resilient, their lives defined by hardship and the whims of nature. But even they had their limits. You are testing those limits now. You hear the scratching again. The rats are back. They are bolder tonight. You feel a small, furry weight brush against your boot. You kick out, a clumsy, slow movement, and hear the scuttle-scuttle of tiny feet retreating into the shadows. They are patient. They know that time is on their side. In the medieval bestiary, the rat was often associated with the underworld, a creature that lived between the cracks of reality. In the dark, they feel like the true owners of the castle, the permanent residents who watch the humans come and go like seasons. Think of the fire again. Not the tavern fire, but the need fire, the ancient bonfire lit in times of plague or distress. Imagine the flames leaping 20 feet into the air. The heat so intense it pushes the night back to the very edge of the horizon. You can feel the warmth on your skin, the way it draws the dampness out of your clothes. The smoke is thick and fragrant, the smell of oak and pine filling your senses. You are standing by the fire, and your friends are there, laughing, passing a skin of wine. The wine is spiced with cinnamon and cloves, a liquid heat that flows through your veins. Drink it in. Let the imagined warmth sustain you through the next hour of the stone's embrace. As you drift into a fitful, shivering sleep, the dungeon seems to expand. The walls recede into infinity, and you are no longer in a cell, but in a vast, subterranean cathedral of ice. The pillars are made of frozen tears, and the altar is a block of unyielding limestone. You are the only worshipper in this temple of the forgotten. The sleepy rhythm of your breath is the only liturgy. You are descending deeper into the history of the world, past the layers of kings and battles, down to the very bedrock of human experience. You are learning what it means to be truly alone, truly cold, and truly human. The second day is ending, or perhaps it is the third. Without the sun, the days bleed into each other like ink on wet parchment. You are a smudge of humanity in a book of stone, but you are still hay. Your heart is still beating. A slow, steady thump, thump, thump against the silence. You have lasted longer than many. You have found a way to live in the hollow spaces. As the winter's breath continues to howl through the upper reaches of the castle, you are safe in your dark cocoon. Cold, miserable, and forgotten, but alive. Rest now, in the arms of the history that claims you. The story is only beginning, and there are many more shadows to walk through before the light returns. Imagine the sound of a distant bell. Dong, dong, dong. It is the Compline bell, the final prayer of the day. In the monasteries, the monks are filing into the stalls, their hoods pulled low, their voices joining in the Nunc Dimittis. Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace. You join your voice to theirs, a silent harmony in the dark. The day is done. The stone is cold. The winter is long. But you are part of the rhythm. You are part of the deep, slow pulse of the medieval world. And for now, that is enough. Just keep breathing. Just keep dreaming of the fire. The morning will come, in its own time, with its own pale, gray mercy. The The transition from the second to the third day is perhaps the most dangerous period for the mind. In the first 48 hours, you were a modern soul trapped in an ancient cage, still vibrating with the frantic energy of the sunlit world. But as we enter this third phase, something shifts. The you that walked through the castle gates is beginning to dissolve, like a piece of salt left in a damp cellar. The walls are no longer just boundaries, they are becoming your skin. The cold is no longer an external enemy. It is a permanent resident of your joints. You find that you are no longer fighting the silence. You are starting to listen to what it has to say. In the medieval era, scholars spoke of axidy, a spiritual sloth, a weight on the soul that comes from profound isolation. It is a sleepy, heavy-lidded despair that doesn't scream, but rather whispers that perhaps the dark is where you were always meant to be. Let us explore the geometry of your confinement. Your cell is likely vaulted, a groined or barrel vault made of smaller, flatter stones called rubble fill. The ceiling curves over you like the ribcage of a leviathan. In the flickering, dying light of your senses, those ribs seem to expand and contract with a slow, geological breath. The medieval mason knew that a curve was stronger than a flat line. It distributed the weight of the entire castle above onto the walls and, ultimately, onto the earth around you. You are at the focal point of all that pressure. Every ton of granite in the North Tower, every flagstone in the Great Hall, every grain of sand in the mortar, it is all pushing down, centering its gravity on this exact coordinate in the dark. It is a humbling thought, isn't it? To be the literal foundation of a lord's power. As you sit in the deepening frost, your mind begins to seek patterns where none exist. You look at the damp stains on the wall, the weeping of the limestone. To a tired eye, they begin to look like maps of forgotten kingdoms, or the profiles of long-dead kings. One stain looks like a dragon with its wings furled. Another looks like a ship lost in a stone sea. You spend hours, or perhaps they are minutes. Time has become a soup, following the coastlines of these stains with your eyes. This is the stage of dungeon dreaming, where the lack of visual stimuli forces the brain to manufacture its own entertainment. You aren't going mad. You are simply adapting. The brain is a light-hungry organ, and when it is starved, it begins to eat its own memories to survive. You find yourself thinking about the Oubliette once more, but with a strange, detached curiosity. In the floor of some dungeons, there was a hole no wider than a man's shoulders. If you were cast there, you would fall 10, 15 feet into a dry well. There was no room to stand, only to crouch or lie in a fetal position. Above you, the heavy wooden lid would be bolted, and the only sound would be the scuttle of beetles and the thump of your own heart. In such a place, the cold is absolute because there is no air movement at all. You are a seed planted in a garden of stone, but a seed that will never sprout. You look at your own floor, thankful for the few feet of space you have, for the ability to pace the 3 steps back and forth. 1, 2, 3, 10. 1, 2, 3, 10. The rhythm is a drumbeat, a declaration of existence. The jailer is late today, or perhaps he is early, or perhaps he has forgotten you entirely. This is the fear that gnaws at the edges of your composure. In a medieval keep, the staff was small, and life was cheap. A sudden fever in the barracks, a skirmish at the border, or a simple fall on a frost-slick battlement could claim the man with the keys. If he doesn't come, who will? The lord of the castle likely doesn't know your name. To the bureaucrats of the feudal system, you are a line of ink on a piece of vellum, and vellum can be misplaced. You listen for the sound of the iron bolt, the clack-shush of the heavy oak door. When it finally comes, the relief is so sharp it feels like a physical blow. The jailer brings a bowl of pottage today, a thick, gray stew of peas, leeks, and perhaps a scrap of salted pork. It is lukewarm, but to your freezing palate, It is a feast. The steam rises in the cold air, a tiny, fleeting ghost of warmth that you try to trap with your hands. As you eat, the jailer lingers for a moment. He looks at you with a gaze that isn't quite pity, but a sort of weary recognition. He, too, is trapped here, though his cage is larger. He spends his days in the damp, his nights in the drafty guardroom. His hands are calloused and blue-veined from the cold. He speaks a few words in a low, guttural tongue, something about the snow outside being waist-deep at the gatehouse. This piece of information is like gold. It gives you a context. You are in a world of white. Above you, the trees are skeletal, their branches groaning under the weight of the ice. The crows are huddled in the pine forests, and the wolves are silent in the valleys. You are part of the winter, a hibernating creature in a burrow of rock. Let us contemplate the ghostly choir. In the medieval world, the veil between the living and the dead was considered very thin, especially in places of great suffering or long silence. As the night, if it is night, deepens, the castle begins to speak in 1,000 voices. The wind whistling through the arrow slits creates a low, moaning flute note. The expansion of the wood in the doors sounds like a series of sharp, rhythmic cracks, like a whip or a snapping bone. To your overstrained ears, these sounds coalesce into a sort of music. You hear the voices of people who aren't there, the murmur of a crowd, the high, clear note of a child's laugh, the chanting of monks from a monastery 10 miles away. It is a sonic mirage. You find yourself joining the choir. You start to hum a low, steady note, matching the frequency of the castle's thrum. It vibrates in your chest, a small, internal fire. In the 14th century, music was seen as a reflection of the Musica Universalis, the harmony of the spheres. By humming, you are trying to realign your shattered spirit with the universe. You are a single string on a vast, stone lute. You imagine the music traveling up through the floor, through the feet of the guards, through the bedposts of the Lord's chambers, out into the freezing night air. You are broadcasting your existence to the stars. The frost on the walls has grown thicker. It has formed patterns that look like fern leaves or delicate lace. If you breathe on it, a small patch melts, revealing the dark, wet stone beneath, only to refreeze a moment later in a new shape. This is the winter's breath in its most literal form. The dungeon is exhaling ice. Your breath, too, is a visible thing, a white plume that drifts toward the ceiling. Each breath is a reminder that your internal furnace is still burning, however dimly. You are consuming yourself to stay warm, burning the fat of your memories and the fuel of your will. Think of the green man of medieval folklore, the spirit of the forest, the symbol of rebirth. In the middle of this freezing tomb, you try to summon his image. You imagine roots breaking through the floor, vines winding around the iron bars, leaves unfurling in the dark. You imagine the smell of damp earth and crushed mint. The green man is the enemy of the stone. He is the force that breaks castles apart over centuries. You invite him into your cell. You ask him to take root in your heart, to give you the patience of a tree. A tree doesn't mind the cold. It just waits. It knows that the sap will rise eventually. You must be like the oak in winter, dormant, still, but stubbornly alive. You look at your clothes again. The linen is now so damp it feels like a second, colder skin. There's a hole in your tunic near the hem, and you spend a long time mending it with your fingers, twisting the frayed threads together. It is a meaningless task, but it keeps your hands moving. In the medieval world, manual labor was a form of prayer. Labor esterare. By mending your rags, you are performing a small act of defiance against the chaos of the dungeon. You are maintaining order in a place of entropy. The rats are louder tonight. They seem to be having a festival of their own in the spaces behind the masonry. You hear them squeaking, a high, needle-sharp sound that pierces the heavy atmosphere. In the medieval mind, rats were sometimes seen as familiars or soul carriers. You wonder if they are bringing you news from the other cells. Are there others nearby? A wall's thickness away? Is there another soul huddling in the straw, listening to the same scratchings? You tap on the wall. Tap, tap, tap. You wait, holding your breath. There is no answer. Only the drip, drip of the water and the distant groan of the wind. The isolation is a physical weight, like a stone laid upon your chest. Let us return to the fire, but this time, let it be the Paschal fire of Easter. Imagine the darkness of a great cathedral, the air thick with expectation. A single spark is struck from flint, and a tiny flame is born. It is passed from candle to candle, a wave of light spreading through the gloom until the entire space is ablaze with gold. You can feel the collective warmth of 1,000 people, the shared breath of community. That light is inside you. It is the inner light that the mystics spoke of, the part of the human spirit that the cold cannot touch and the dark cannot swallow. Visualize that flame in the center of your being. It is small, but it is hot. It is the color of a summer sun. Let it radiate outward, through your blood, through your bones, until your very skin feels warm to the imagination. As the third night draws to a close, you enter a state of profound stillness. Your shivering has stopped, not because you are warm, but because your body has reached a plateau of endurance. You are in the sleepy zone now, a place where the pain is a distant hum and the reality of the dungeon is like a play you are watching from the balcony. You see the world-weary historian standing in the corner, nodding to you. He knows how this ends. He has read the chronicles. He knows that most who entered these depths never saw the spring. But he also knows that the human spirit is a stubborn, irrational thing. You find yourself reciting the names of the months, a litany of the year. January, February, March, when the snow begins to melt and the first snowdrops peek through the mud. April, May, June, when the hay is high and the sun stays in the sky until the owls begin to hunt. You are counting your way toward the light. You are building a bridge of words across the winter. The stone is cold, yes. The dark is deep, yes. But the year is a circle, and the circle must turn. You are currently at the very bottom of the arc, the nadir of the sun's journey. Every second that passes is a second closer to the thaw. The ghostly choir is singing a lullaby now. It is the sound of the castle tucking itself in for the night. The masonry settles with a final, deep sigh. The rats retreat to their nests. Even the water drips seem to slow their tempo. You lay your head back against the wall, the stone surprisingly smooth against your temple. You are a prisoner of the Middle Ages, a guest of the freezing dark, a witness to the silence. But you are also a traveler, and your journey through the hollow stone is far from over. Sleep now, for a few minutes, in the arms of history. Dream of the fire. Dream of the green man. Dream of the light that is coming, however slowly, to find you. As we cross the threshold into the fourth movement of our descent, a strange alchemy begins to take place. The modern world, with its buzzing electricity, its neon lights, and its frantic pace, has become a dream, a flickering shadow of a memory that feels less real than the cold stone beneath your palms. You have entered the heart of the medieval winter. Time is no longer a line moving forward. It has become a circle, a slow, heavy rotation around the axis of your own endurance. In the 14th century, they believed that the world was composed of 4 elements, and here, you are dominated by 2, earth and water. The earth is the unyielding weight of the castle, the limestone and granite that hold you fast. The water is the moisture that weeps from the walls, the frost that blooms on the iron, and the relentless, rhythmic drip, drip, drip that has become the soundtrack of your existence. Let us focus on that sound, for in the silence of the freezing dungeon, the ear becomes a master of detail. The drip is not a single note. It is a symphony. There is the plink of water hitting a shallow puddle on the uneven floor, a sharp, clear sound that echoes briefly against the vaulted ceiling. Then there's the thud of a heavier drop landing in the damp straw, a muffled, deadened sound that speaks of rotten decay. There's the hiss of moisture sliding down a particularly smooth stretch of masonry, and the tiny, crystalline crack as a droplet freezes mid-fall, caught by the parasitic chill of the air. You find yourself conducting this orchestra in your mind, raising a numbed hand to time the next fall. Now, and now, and now. It is a way to claim the space, to make the environment yours through the act of observation. The sleepy quality of the dungeon has reached its peak. Your metabolism has slowed to a crawl. Your heart beats with the deliberate pace of a hibernating bear. This lethargy is a macy, a soft veil drawn over the sharp edges of your suffering. You spend long periods in a state of waking sleep, where your eyes are open but your mind is wandering through the landscapes of your own history. You become a weaver of tales, spinning intricate narratives from the threads of your past. You aren't just remembering a meal. You are reconstructing the entire sensory experience of a harvest feast. You can smell the roasting venison, spiced with pepper and ginger, luxuries that cost a laborious yearly wage. You can feel the heat of the great hole, the way the fire roared in the hearth until the air shimmered. You can hear the jester's bells and the deep, resonant tone of the Lord's laughter. You live in these stories for hours, using them as a shield against the freezing reality of the stone. The medieval world was one of intense storytelling. In the absence of books, the voice was the vessel of culture. In your cell, you become both the teller and the listener. You whisper the old legends to the shadows, the story of Roland at Roncesvalles, the tragedy of Tristan and Iseult, the tales of the saints who walked through fire and felt only the coolness of a spring breeze. These stories are not just entertainment, they are architecture. You are building a cathedral of words inside the prison of stone. You find that your vocabulary is changing, the modern slang falling away to be replaced by the rhythmic, grounded language of the earth. You speak of hearth and home, of frost and field, of the quick and the dead. The language of the Middle Ages is a heavy, tactile thing, like a wool cloak, and you wrap it tightly around your shivering spirit. Let us consider the sensory geography of your cell. To a modern person, this is a 6 by 8 foot box. To you, after 4 days, it is a vast territory with distinct regions. There is the coastal zone near the door, where the air is slightly more active and the smells of the outer corridor, old smoke, damp wool, and the faint metallic tang of the jailer's keys, occasionally drift in. There is the highlands of the straw pile, where you seek refuge from the rising damp. There is the dark forest of the far corner, where the shadows are so thick they feel like velvet, and where the rats hold their secret parliaments. You have mapped every crack, every mineral deposit, every tool mark left by the mason's chisel. You know the grain of your world. The cold is a color now. It isn't just an absence of heat. It is a deep, bruised indigo that seems to emanate from the stones themselves. When you close your eyes, you see patterns of blue and violet dancing against your eyelids, the ice fire of a brain trying to stay awake. In the medieval era, they spoke of the blue hour, the time of twilight when the world is between states. Down here, every hour is the blue hour. You are living in a permanent twilight, a state of transition that never quite reaches the destination. You are a ghost inhabiting a body that is still, stubbornly, refusing to give up. The jailer arrives today with surprise. Along with the hard bread and the icy water, he brings a small bundle of dry wood and a tiny brazier. This is not for your comfort, primarily. The Lord has a guest, a high-ranking cleric or rival nobleman, and the hospitality of the castle must be maintained even in the lower depths, perhaps to keep the prisoner alive for a later ransom or more public judgment. The jailer strikes a flint, and for the first time in 96 hours, you see a real fire. The first spark is like a miracle, a tiny, golden star born in the palm of the dark. When the wood catches, the sound is a revelation. The sharp snap and crackle of dry oak meeting flame. The heat is almost painful. It hits your face like a physical blow, making your skin tingle and your eyes water. The smell of the smoke is the most beautiful thing you have ever experienced. The sharp, resinous scent of the forest, the soul of the wood being released into the air. You lean forward, hands outstretched, and for a moment, the dungeon vanishes. You are no longer a prisoner. You are a sun worshipper at an altar of light. The orange glow dances on the wet walls, turning the weeping limestone into sheets of molten gold. The shadows, once terrifying, now perform a playful dance, leaping and twirling in the newfound warmth. But the fire is a fickle friend. It creates a microclimate of warmth that only extends a few feet. Beyond that circle, the cold is waiting, more intense by contrast, and the fire brings the smoke. In the poorly ventilated cell, the smoke begins to coil around the vaulted ceiling, a gray, stinging mist that makes you cough. In the medieval world, smoke was a constant companion. In the cottage, the tavern, and the hole. But here, it feels like a heavy hand pressing on your chest. You have to choose between the warmth and the air. You huddle low to the floor, where the air is clearer, watching the embers pulse like a dying heart. The fire reveals things the darkness hid. You see the graffiti of the centuries more clearly. There are names carved in a rough, Gothic script. Johannes, Willem, Piers. There are dates that stretch back into the reigns of kings you only know from legends. There are drawings. A crude sketch of a castle with banners flying, a bird in flight, a wheel with broken spokes. These are the signatures of the vanished. You realize that you are part of a long, silent procession of souls who have warmed themselves at this same stone hearth. The historian in you feels a profound sense of continuity. You are not alone. You are part of a lineage. The dungeon is a dark library, and the fire is allowing you to read the spines of the books. As the fire begins to fade, sinking back into a bed of glowing red coals, a deep melancholy settles over you. The transition from light back to dark is harder than the original descent. You watch the last tongue of flame lick the blackened wood and then vanish, leaving only a shimmering heat haze. The shadows creep back in, reclaiming their territory inch by inch. The blue-gray cold returns, more insistent than ever. You try to trap the remaining warmth in your clothes, pulling your tunic tight, but it is like trying to hold water in a sieve. The heat is a memory now, a golden dream that makes the current reality feel even more bitter. In the 14th century, the night was divided into watches. You are in the deepest watch now, the dead of night where the world is at its coldest. You find yourself thinking about the blacksmith who forged your chains. You can see him in your mind's eye, the sweat on his brow, the rhythmic clink-clank of his hammer on the anvil, the white-hot iron being quenched in a barrel of water with a violent hiss. That iron was born in fire, just as you were. But now, it is cold and silent, a heavy weight that binds you to the earth. You wonder if the blacksmith ever thought about the person who would wear his work. Did he feel a twinge of pity? Or was it just another commission for the Lord's army? The rats are silent tonight. Even they seem to be huddling together for warmth in the deep recesses of the walls. The silence is so absolute that you can hear the sizzle of your own blood in your ears, a high-pitched, internal vibration. You are a closed system, a tiny pocket of life in a vast, entropic universe of stone. You begin to recite the calendar of the shepherd, the traditional law of the seasons. When the elder blooms, the summer is nigh. When the swallow leaves, the cold is at the door. You are anchoring yourself to the natural world, refusing to let the dungeon become the only reality. Imagine you are a pilgrim on the road to Canterbury or Santiago de Compostela. You are walking through a frozen landscape, but your heart is full of purpose. Each step brings you closer to a holy place, to a shrine where the light never fails. The cold is a penance, a way to strip away the vanities of the world. In the dungeon, you are a pilgrim who has reached the end of the road. There is nowhere left to go but inward. You are exploring the interior castle that Saint Teresa would later write about, the layers of the soul that can only be reached through silence and suffering. You find that you are stronger than you thought. The modern you would have broken in an hour, but the medieval you, the one who has re-emerged in the dark, is made of tougher stuff. You are made of history, and history does not break easily. As the fourth day draws to a close, the symphony of the drip resumes its main theme. Plink, thud, crack. The rhythm is comforting now, a familiar heartbeat. You lay your head down on the damp straw, the smell of the fading smoke still lingering in your hair. You are tired, a deep, soul-level exhaustion that feels like being submerged in warm oil. The sleepy historian whispers a final story for the night, a tale of a king who traded his crown for a single hour of sunlight and found that the sunlight was worth more than all the gold in the world. You hold that thought as you drift into the blue hour. You are rich in shadows, a millionaire of silence, and tomorrow, the gray light will return to tell you that you are still alive. We have reached the midway point of our long vigil, and the air in the hollow stone has taken on a different quality. It is no longer just cold. It is hungry. In the medieval understanding of the world, nothing was truly inanimate. Everything, from the soaring spire of a cathedral to the lowest block in a dungeon, possessed a certain spirit or inclivity. As we enter the fifth part of our narration, you begin to feel that the castle itself is feeding on your presence. It is a slow, patient consumption. It drinks your warmth, it absorbs the sound of your breathing, and it waits for your resolve to soften like the damp mortar between its teeth. The sleepy haze that has settled over you is now less of a comfort and more of a thick, gray fog. You are drifting, a ship without a rudder, lost in the vast, subterranean sea of the 14th century. Let us speak of hunger, not the sharp, demanding hunger of a missed lunch, but the deep, hollow ache of the long-term prisoner. Your stomach has long since stopped growling. It has shrunk to the size of a fist, a tight knot in the center of your being. In the medieval era, fasting was a common practice, a way to purify the soul and bring one closer to the divine. But there is nothing holy about this involuntary fast. The pottage the jailer brings is thinner today, a watery broth with the occasional floating leaf of kale that tastes of the winter's rot. You find yourself eating with a slow, ritualistic intensity, using your wooden spoon to scrape every last molecule of sustenance from the rough grain of the bowl. Every calorie is a weapon. Every swallow is a small, quiet victory over the void. This hunger does strange things to the mind. It clarifies the senses even as it weakens the body. You find that your sense of smell has become unnaturally acute. You can smell the change in the weather through the stone. The arrival of a fresh snowfall fly above carries a crisp, ozone-rich scent that filters down through the cracks. You can smell the tallow of the jailer's candle long before he appears, a fatty, cloying aroma that makes your mouth water with a sudden, savage intensity. You are becoming like the rats, a creature of pure instinct, tuned to the frequency of survival. You begin to understand why the medieval bestiaries depicted the world as a place of constant struggle, of hunters and the hunted. In this cell, you are the prey, and the cold is the predator that never tires. In this state of sensory sharpening, your world-weary historian begins to engage in a form of mental alchemy. You start to transform the leaden reality of your cell into the gold of philosophical inquiry. You think about the nature of freedom. In the high halls of the castle, freedom is the ability to hunt in the Lord's forest, to ride a horse through the village, to sit at the high table. But hey, freedom is a different thing. It is the freedom to think. The walls can hold your body, but they cannot hold the active intellect, the part of the human soul that the philosophers of the Middle Ages believed was a spark of the divine. You find yourself constructing elaborate arguments about the nature of time and space, debating with invisible scholars in the flickering light of your imagination. You are Thomas Aquinas. You are Boethius writing the consolation of philosophy while awaiting his execution. You are the architect of your own intellectual keep. Let us consider the texture of the medieval night again. To us, night is a temporary inconvenience solved by a switch. To the prisoner, night is a physical presence. It has a weight, a texture like heavy wool. In the darkness, the sensory detail of your cell changes. The walls, which look so solid in the gray light, now feel like they are made of a dense, vibrating energy. You can feel the hum of the castle's foundations, the deep, tectonic grumble of the earth beneath. You find yourself leaning your head against the stone, listening to its secrets. The stone tells you of the ancient seas that formed it, of the pressure that turned silt into rock, and of the men who hold it from the quarry with ropes and sweat. You are connected to the deep history of the planet. You are part of the geology of Europe. The jailer is more talkative today, perhaps driven by the same loneliness that gnaws at you. He tells you of the world above, of a wedding in the village, of a merchant who was robbed on the forest road, of the great frost that has turned the river into a highway of ice. These details are like splashes of color on a gray canvas. You can see the bride in her gown of blue wool, hear the scrunch of the merchant's boots on the frozen mud, feel the biting wind that whips the ice on the river. These stories are a bridge. They remind you that the world is still there, that life is still messy and vibrant and unpredictable. You cling to these fragments, repeating them to yourself after the jailer has gone. A wedding, a robbery, a river of ice. They are the stars by which you navigate the dark. And then there is the folk mystery of the dungeon. In the medieval mind, every place had its genius lucky, its presiding spirit. You begin to feel the presence of the old one of the castle, a spirit that was here before the first stone was laid and will be here after the last tower falls. It is a slow, patient entity, indifferent to the quarrels of kings or the suffering of prisoners. You find yourself leaving a small portion of your bread in the corner, a tiny sacrifice to the spirit of the place. It isn't a rational act. It is a primal one. You are negotiating with the environment. You are seeking a truce with the cold. You find that when you acknowledge the spirit of the stone, the silence feels less hostile. It becomes a shared quiet, a mutual waiting. The frost on the walls has formed a new pattern tonight, a series of interconnected circles that look like the wheels of fortune depicted in medieval manuscripts. In the Middle Ages, the rota fortunae was a powerful symbol of the unpredictability of life. One day you are at the top, a king in his crown. The next, the wheel turns, and you are crushed beneath its weight. You are currently at the very bottom of the wheel, but the wheel must turn. This thought is a cold comfort, but it is a comfort nonetheless. The dungeon is a temporary state, even if temporary means years. The wheel is always in motion, even if its movement is too slow for the human eye to see. Think of the sleepy narrator as a guide through the labyrinth of your own mind. You are descending through the layers of your consciousness, past the trivial worries of the modern day, down to the core of your being. In this freezing dungeon, all the noise has been stripped away. You are left with the essentials, your breath, your thoughts, and the endurance of your spirit. You find that there is a certain melancholy joy in this simplicity. You are no longer performing for the world, You are just being. You are human is a presence in the dark. This is the subtle mystery of the dungeon, that in the place of ultimate restriction, you find a strange, terrifying kind of clarity. Imagine the sound of a distant lute. It is a thin, haunting melody, drifting through the vents from the minstrel's gallery. It is a song of courtly love, of knights and ladies and the rose of the world. To your ears, it sounds like it's coming from another dimension. The music is delicate, fragile, a thread of silver in a world of lead. You follow the melody, letting it pull you out of your cell and up through the floors, past the kitchens and the barracks, out into the winter air. You are flying over the snow-covered forest, the moonlight glinting off the frozen lakes. You are free for the length of a song, and when the music ends and the silence returns, you find that the cell feels a little larger, the stone a little less heavy. You look at your hands again. The dirt is etched into the lines of your skin, a map of your incarceration. Your nails are broken and jagged. In the medieval world, hands were the primary tools of existence. You think of the hands that built this castle, the calloused, scarred hands of the laborious, the precise, skilled hands of the masons. Your hands are now part of that story. You are a worker in silence, an apprentice to the dark. You find yourself performing small, repetitive tasks, braiding the damp straw, smoothing the surface of the wooden bowl, counting your fingers over and over. These are the commas and ellipses of your life, the pauses that extend the narrative, the slow pacing that keeps the mind from racing toward the end. As the fifth day draws to a close, the symphony of the drip changes its tempo. A thaw is beginning far above, and the plink, thud has become a faster, more insistent patter-patter. The moisture on the walls is turning into small streams, carving new paths through the grime of the centuries. The air feels slightly heavier, slightly less brittle. The transition from the deep freeze to the damp thaw is a new challenge. The humidity rises, making your clothes feel even more sodden. But there's a hope in the movement of the water. Water is the element of change. If the ice can melt, then the world can shift. You listen to the patter-patter, and for the first time in days, you feel a faint, flickering warmth in your chest. It isn't the fire of the brazier. It is the fire of the will to see the spring. The world-weary historian nods to you from the shadows. He knows that the thaw is often more dangerous than the frost, bringing fever and rot. But he also knows that the thaw is the first step toward the greening of the world. You are a witness to the turning of the seasons in the heart of the stone. You are a traveler who has reached the halfway mark of the long night. Rest your head against the weeping masonry. Listen to the music of the melting ice. Dream of the snowdrops. Dream of the first, pale sun of March. You are still here. You are still breathing. You are the master of the freezing dungeon, and the story is moving toward the light. The thaw has brought with it a different kind of burden, a heavy, cloying humidity that turns the air into a wet shroud. As we enter the sixth part of our long vigil, the sleepy historian invites you to look past the physical stone and into the psychological fabric of the medieval mind. In the 14th century, life was often compared to a tapestry, woven by the hands of the fates or directed by the loom of divine providence. In your cell, you have become both the weaver and the thread. The storyteller in you is no longer just recounting memories. You are beginning to interlace them with the immediate sensory reality of the dungeon. The dampness of the straw becomes the mist over a highland loch. The rusted iron of the door becomes the armor of a fallen hero. The silence becomes the vast, empty space between the stars. You are participating in a grand, slow-motion act of creation, a melancholy artistry that is the only thing standing between you and the void. Let us consider the voice of the dungeon once more. It has become more complex with the rising moisture. The symphony of the drip has evolved into a chorus of the stone. You hear the wood of the heavy door expanding, a series of low, rhythmic groans that sound like the castle is talking in its sleep. You hear the far-off thrum of the wind in the chimney stacks, which, in your lethargic state, sounds like the low-register pipes of a cathedral organ. This is the stage where the sensory detail of the dungeon becomes almost hallucinatory. You find yourself staring at a single, dark knot in the oak of the door until it begins to swirl and pulse, becoming an eye that watches you with a subtle humor and an ancient, world-weary wisdom. You aren't losing your mind. You are simply witnessing the anima mundi, the soul of the world, which the medieval alchemists believed resided in all things. In this damp, sleepy state, your thoughts drift to the women of the Middle Ages, those who spent their lives in the parlors and the solar rooms above. You imagine them sitting by the hearth, their fingers flying over the loom, weaving the very tapestries that you now envision on your bare stone walls. You can see the threads of silk and wool, the deep indigos, the rich madder reds, the bright welled yellows. You can hear the rhythmic clackshush of the shuttle as it passes through the warp. In the medieval era, weaving was a meditative act, a way to impose order on a chaotic world. You begin to weave your own tapestry in the dark. You take a thread of the jailer's voice, a thread of the cold wind, a thread of the smell of wet earth, and you cross them with the bright, golden threads of your memories. You are creating a mental shroud, a protective layer of narrative that keeps the biting frost of reality at bay. The jailer arrives with a different energy today. The thaw has made his work harder. The steps are slippery, and the dampness has made his joints ache even more than yours. He doesn't bring pottage today, but a heel of cheese, hard, salty, and smelling of the cave it was aged in. It is a sharp, pungent flavor that cuts through the dullness of your palate like a knife. In the medieval world, cheese was a staple of the traveler and the labour, a concentrated burst of energy. You savor it, letting the salt melt on your tongue, feeling the metallic tang of the nutrition as it enters your system. The jailer grunts a few words about the floods in the valley, a piece of news that expands your world once again. You can see the gray, churning water of the river breaking its banks, sweeping away the winter's debris, carrying the old world toward the sea. You realize that you, too, are being carried. This dungeon experience is a flood of the soul, washing away the superficialities of your modern life. Let us talk about the persona of the historian. From this vantage point, halfway between the earth and the sky, you see the dry wit of history itself. The castle was built to last forever, yet the moss is already eating it. The Lord thinks he is the master of the domain, yet he is a prisoner of his own duties and the freezing weather. You, the prisoner, are the only one with the time to truly observe the architecture of despair. There's a certain soft-spoken irony in your situation. You are the most connected person in the castle because you are the only one who is truly still. You are the still point of the turning world, as the poet would later say. You find yourself smiling in the dark, a small, storyteller smile at the absurdity of it all. The stones are heavy, the dark is deep, but the human activity of the mind is a light that no amount of limestone can extinguish. Think of the folklore of the winter nights. In the medieval villages, this was the time for the telling of the bees and the hushing of the spirits. People would gather by the fire, their shadows looming large on the timbered walls, and speak of the wild hunt that rode through the winter gales. You can hear the ghostly hounds baying in the wind that rattles your high arrow slit. You can see the chilling legends taking shape in the damp corners of your cell. But instead of fear, you feel a sense of warm companionship. These legends are the forgotten carols of the human race, the ways we have always made sense of the dark. You join your voice to the chorus, whispering the names of the old gods and the new saints, creating a gentle protection around your straw bed. The humidity has turned the frost on the walls into a weeping moisture. The stones are no longer dry and brittle. They are slick and flesh-like. If you press your cheek against the wall, it feels like the skin of a great, slumbering beast. You are inside the stomach of the Middle Ages. The smell of the cell has changed too. The sharp ammoniac sting has been replaced by the earthy scent of a fresh-turned grave. It is not a smell of death, but of potentiality. It is the smell of the forest floor before the first shoots of spring break through. You find yourself breathing deeply, drawing the sensory detail of the earth into your lungs. You are becoming one with the masonry, a human fossil in the making. Let us consider the pacing of your days. Without a clock, without a sun, your heartbeat has become your metronome. Your thoughts have slowed to match the long, descriptive sentences of the castle's own history. You no longer think in bullet points or quick takes. You think in commas and ellipses, in pauses and breaths. You spend an entire hour, or what feels like an hour, following the path of a single silver trail of a slug across the floor. You admire the persistence of the creature, the way it carries its home with it through the dark. You are like the slug. Your home is now the interior space of your own head. You are comfortable in your discomfort, situated in your displacement. The atmosphere of the dungeon is now one of subtle mystery. You begin to notice things that you missed in the first few. As we move into the penultimate chapter of our journey, the walls of the cell have ceased to be a barrier and have become, instead, a mirror. In the medieval world, the vita contemplativa, the contemplative life, was often forced upon the soul by stone and iron, turning the prisoner into a reluctant monk, a secular hermit dwelling in the roots of the world. You have passed through the initial fire of panic and the long, blue ice of despair. Now, you find yourself in a state of gentle suspension. The sleepy rhythm of the dungeon has become your natural pulse. The sensory detail that once overwhelmed you, the bite of the frost, the sting of the damp, the weight of the silence, has integrated into your very being. You are no longer you in the sense of a modern citizen of the sun. You are a creature of the hollow stone, a witness to the slow geological breathing of the 14th century. Let us explore the atmosphere of this seventh day. The air is thick, not just with moisture, but with the accumulated history of the castle. Every sigh that has been exhaled in this room over the centuries seems to linger in the melancholy humidity. You find yourself breathing in the echoes of 1,000 forgotten stories. In the medieval mind, the breath was the soul, and as you inhale the damp, earthy air, you are performing a silent communion with the vanished. You think of the voice of the historian, not as a dry narrator of facts, but as a world-weary keeper of secrets. You realize that your time in the dark has given you a subtle humor, a perspective that the lords and knights in the sun-drenched halls above can never possess. You know the root of the castle, while they only know the flower. The pacing of your thoughts is slowed to a crawl, mirroring the long, descriptive sentences of the masonry itself. You find yourself spending an eternity, or perhaps it is only the time it takes for a single candle to gutter, contemplating the texture of your own skin against the rough-hewn limestone. Your hands have become pale, almost translucent, like the vellum of an ancient manuscript. You trace the blue veins beneath your skin and see them as rivers on a map of a hidden kingdom. This is the subtle mystery of the dungeon. When the external world is stripped away, the internal world expands to fill the void. You are no longer in a cell. You are in a vast, internal cathedral, where the forgotten carols of your childhood play on a loop in the silence of the stone. The jailer arrives with the final watch of the winter. He looks older today, his world-weary eyes reflecting the toll that the season has taken on the living. He brings a bowl of peace pottage, thick and yellow, smelling of the smoke of a peat fire. It is a warm presence in your hands, a sensory anchor that pulls you back from the drifting edges of your mind. As you eat, he speaks of the first thaw in the high passes, of the melting of the snow bridges, and of the stirring of the bays in the caves. This news is a crescendo in the symphony of your isolation. The world is turning again. The wheel of fortune is making its slow, grinding rotation toward the light. You feel a soft-spoken hope rising in your chest, a gentle heat that has nothing to do with the fire and everything to do with the resilience of the human spirit. Let us talk about the sensory detail of the light. The sliver of gray that visits your cell has taken on a pearly quality, a sign that the winter sun is gaining strength. You watch it dance across the weeping walls, highlighting the glittering crystals of frost that still cling to their iron bars. It is a painterly light, the kind of light that Vermeer would later capture. Intimate, quiet, and momentous. You find yourself conversing with this light, thanking it for its persistence. In the medieval world, light was divinity made visible, and in this freezing dungeon, you have become a mystic of the shadows. You see the beauty in the rot, the art in the decay. You are the weaver of tales who has found the golden thread in the grey warp of the prison. The rats have become your silent companions in this final stretch. They are no longer intruders, but fellow travelers in the dark history of the keep. You watch them navigate the crevices of the stone with a grace that you envy. They are comfortable in the depths, situated in the cold. You find yourself subtly imitating their stillness, their patience. You have learned the language of the loom, not the loom of the weaver, but the loom of the earth, where the threads of time and stone are interlaced. You are a part of the pattern now, a knot in the tapestry of the Middle Ages. The sleepy historian in you recognizes that this immersion is the true education of the soul. You wouldn't last a day in a freezing medieval dungeon if you fought it. You only survive by becoming the dungeon itself. Think of the folklore of the breaking of the frost. In the villages, they would soon be blessing the ploughs and lighting the fires of St. Brigid. You can feel the vibration of the living earth through the foundations of the castle. The great frost is cracking, and the sighs of the stone are turning into whispers of the spring. You find yourself humming a forgotten carol, a melody that your grandmother sang by the hearth. It is a storyteller's song, a warm embrace in the chilling dark. The mood of the cell has shifted from melancholy to expectant. You are standing on the threshold of a new era, a witness to the rebirth of the world from the womb of the stone. The world-weary historian stands in the corner of your imagination, his dry wit glinting in the fading light. He reminds you that history is not just about the kings and the battles, but about the silence of the prisoner, the endurance of the anonymous, and the patience of the stone. You are richer now than you were when you descended the spiral stairs. You have uncovered the chilling legends and found the human heart at the center of them. You have wandered the candlelit parlors of your own memory and found the warmth that the winter could not steal. You are ready for the final turn of the story. As the seventh night falls, the symphony of the drip slows to a hush. The silence is no longer crushing, but protective, like a heavy wool blanket. You curl into your damp straw, feeling the soft-spoken presence of the centuries around you. You are at home in the hollow stone. The sleepy narrator whispers a final blessing for this part of the journey. May the cold remind you of your heat. May the dark remind you of your light. And may the stone remind you of your strength. You drift into a dreamless sleep, the rhythm of your breath joining the rhythm of the castle. Tomorrow, the gate will groan open, or perhaps it won't, but it no longer matters. You have lasted more than a day. You have lasted an age. The circle is closing. As we enter the eighth and final movement of our vigil, the sleepy historian asks you to take a deep, slow breath of the thickening air. The subtle humor of the universe is finally revealing its hand. You have spent what feels like an eternity in the hollow stone, your world defined by the geometry of despair and the symphony of the drip, but their atmosphere is shifting. It is no longer just the thaw of the ice. It is the thaw of the era itself. In the medieval mind, the end of a trial was not just a release, it was a transfiguration. You are standing at the threshold where the chilling legends of the night meet the warmth of the rising sun. The pacing of your heart is steady, a gentle drumbeat that has outlasted the biting frost of the castle's deepest winter. Let us consider the voice of the stones one last time. They are no longer hostile or hungry. They are saturated with your presence. You have woven yourself into the tapestry of the keep so thoroughly that the sensory detail of the walls, the weeping limestone, the rusted iron, the cracked mortar, feels like a part of your own memory. You find yourself conversing with the silence as if it were an old friend. You have learned that the hollow stone is not an empty space, but a vessel for the human spirit. The world-weary historian in you understands that every dungeon is eventually unmade by time. The great frost will break, the Lord will fall, and the castle will return to the earth from which it was quarried. But the story you have created here, that is a thread that will never unravel. The pacing of this final hour is long and meditative. You find yourself drifting between the past and the present, your thoughts moving like smoke through the vaulted ceiling. You think of the US or the Europe or the Australia you left behind, and they feel like forgotten carols, melodies that are beautiful, but distant. Your reality is the texture of the straw, the smell of the damp earth, and the weight of the history you have endured. You are comfortable in this final suspension. You have uncovered the subtle mystery of the medieval soul, that strength is not found in the high tower, but in the stillness of the bottommost pit. You are situated in the roots of the world, and you are ready to see the fruit. The jailer arrives for the last time. He doesn't bring bread or pottage. He brings news and a heavy iron key that looks like a holy relic in the fading light. The king has declared an amnesty, while the Lord has reached a truce, or perhaps the winter has simply relented enough for the machinery of justice to turn. The sound of their iron bolts sliding back is not a clack, but a song, a crescendo of liberty that echoes through the entire structure of the keep. As the heavy oak door groans open, the air that rushes in is staggering. It is fresh, it is cold, and it carries the scent of pine and thawing mud. It is the breath of the living world, and it hits you with the force of a miracle. You stand up, your joints protesting with a dry, rhythmic crackle. Your muscles are weak, but your spirit is unyielding. You walk toward the door, your thin leather shoes clicking on the wet stone. As you ascend the spiral stairs, the light begins to change. It goes from gray to pearl to gold. You see the shadows of the gods on the walls, but they no longer look like monsters. They look like men, weary and cold and human. You reach the top of the stairs and step out into the bailey. The sun is rising over the battlements, and the light is so intense it makes your eyes weep. The snow is melting in patches, revealing the dark, rich earth beneath. The world is raw and vibrant and beautiful. Let us linger on the sensory detail of this return. The sound of a blackbird singing in the forest beyond the walls. The smell of roasting meat from the kitchens, no longer a taunt, but a promise. The feel of the wind on your pale face, cleansing the dampness of the cell. You have lasted a day, a week, an age. You have survived the alchemy of solitude. You look back at the keep, that mountain of hollow stone, and you feel a gentle sort of melancholy. You are leaving a part of yourself down there, a signature in the deck. But you are taking the history of the place with you, woven into the fabric of your soul. The historian in you nods a final time. He reminds you that freedom is not just the absence of walls, but the presence of light. You walk toward the gatehouse, your pace slow and deliberate. You are not rushing back to the modern world. You are carrying the medieval world with you, its patience, its faith, and its deep, sleepy wisdom. You pass through the archway, and the forest opens up before you, a cathedral of ice and budding life. You are ready to tell the story to the next generation of dreamers. You are the narrator now. You are the weaver. You are alive. As we conclude our journey, the sleepy historian invites you to make yourself comfortable in your own time. Dim the lights of your modern life for a moment and listen to the echoes of the stone. The medieval dungeon is no longer a prison for you. It is a library of the human spirit. Tell me in the comments, what did you uncover in the dark? What story will you carry into the morning? If you haven't already, let the day fade away one last time. Pour a final cup of warm tea and savor the silence. The past has breathed, and now it is resting. And so should you. Tonight, we wandered candlelit parlors, heard forgotten carols, and survived the chilling legends of the freezing dark. We found that the stone is cold, but the heart is hot. We found that the night is long, but the sun is inevitable. Rest now, traveler. The hollow stone is silent. The winter is broken. The story is complete. Sleep deeply, and dream of the green world that is waiting for you at the edge of the light. You lasted the day. You lasted the night. You are home.